listeners. Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD, BlenderHD. You're going to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, December 29th. We'll be taking a look at the Week 17 NFL slate for GPP strategy on DraftKings. Hit that thumbs up button. First thing in the door, I'll wave those thumbs at you until you press that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Join with me here on this Friday, the last Friday of the year. Kyle Murray, not Kyler Murray, although you can roster Kyler Murray today. I mean, there's some, Kyle, there are some cheap quarterbacks that may be in play. You may be better than some of them, so maybe we should be rostering you in our quarterback spot. But we actually have a big slate. We have 13 games on this slate, right? We don't have a Monday game. Right? We don't have these Saturday games. So this is we have a healthy amount of choices, but there's still several obvious ones.
Yeah, definitely. It actually feels strange because we've had, I think, a run of probably 3 or 4 weeks now with the smaller main Sunday slates because of buys, and then obviously the holiday weeks where you had the Thanksgiving and then the Christmas game. So it feels weird to have the full kind of complement of games on the main slate. But yeah, there's definitely some vomit stacks that you can look at with some of these cheap quarterbacks, and there's obviously some obvious options like you mentioned. But I think it'll overall be a pretty good week, and I'm looking forward to it. And obviously, Week 18 can sometimes be extremely hectic, so I like to enjoy Week 17 as much as I can because you never know what you're going to get with Week 18.
Okay, but I mean, even Week 17 is a little bit hectic. I mean, we have a lot of injury situations. I mean, most of them are kind of taken care of. I mean, I mean, we already have that. We have Keenan Allen out, right, in our projections, it seems like, because Quentin Johnston, some of the other Chargers guys are bumped up. But we're still waiting on news for, like, a lot of guys. I mean, Josh Jacobs, Will Levis, Michael Pittman, Trevor Lawrence, Cole Kmet, Zay Jones, Brian Robinson. I mean, maybe we don't go all the way down. Zach Moss, Deonta Foreman, Juwan Jennings. I mean, some of these guys I've already looked at. They're more probable to play, even though they still have the Q tag on it. I don't know how much this is going to affect what I think a lot of people are going to do on this slate or what the projections would be. I think the only person would be Josh Jacobs, because I think if Jacobs is out, Zamir White becomes more of a value option. But the thing that I notice as a whole, macro-wise on this slate, is that from a projection standpoint, and obviously you get our projections here at RotoGrinders, click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month of a combo premium subscription. You'll get all the projections for all the sports, all the ownership, all the everything. Most of the value is on garbage teams. Like it feels like you want to play these high team total teams, and we'll get to them. And then you're going to have to kind of dumpster dive at some of these positions where these, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott, 13.5 implied team total for the Patriots, or Demario Douglas, right? Then we'd see like Zamir White on a team, the Las Vegas away with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback with a 19.5 implied team total. I mean, we see, if people are going to play a cheap quarterback, they got like Giants with a 19 implied team total. Got James Conner or something with Arizona. I'm just looking at the value piece. The Washington wide receivers, right? They go, I'm going to play someone with an 18.5 implied team total. Or even I'm going to play Quentin Johnston, if you played Quentin Johnston this year, you're probably down a lot of money, right? No matter what format you're playing. Do you find there to be any way, looking at this slate, until we go through some games, that it's hard to avoid playing some garbage player in your lineup? Because like none of the good teams have cheap value.
For the most part, yeah. I think there are a couple spots where there are a couple of good guys, or I guess guys on good teams that are like not necessarily cheap, but like Clyde Edwards-Helaire 5.3. I think he's a really strong value option. Obviously, we're projecting Pacheco to be out. Seems unlikely he'll play, and I guess we'll figure out with McKinnon as we get deeper into obviously McKinnon being out as well. You have to assume that we're probably going to have two guys with P. Ryan and Prince behind Clyde, behind him, like probably all the work is going to go to Clyde here, who's been fine in kind of replacement duty there. So Clyde, I think, is one of those guys with I know 5.3 isn't a super cheap value price tag, but I still think it's enough to be, a value option that fits in there. But for some of the other cheap guys, another guy that stands out to me, Cedric Wilson. I know last time he kind of popped into play, he was a kind of a super dud there with Tyreek Hill out a couple weeks ago, but with Waddle looking like he's going to be out, Wilson's going to be at least in consideration again. But yeah, for the most part, after that, it does. You are looking at guys like Douglas and Ezekiel Elliott. Gerald Everett's a guy who's at tight end position 3-5, who I think is a strong value option with Palmer and Keenan Allen projected to be out right now. Curtis Samuel, like you mentioned, a Washington receiver. So yeah, I do agree that a lot of these value guys who sort of make sense and are popping the projections a little bit are guys on some teams with some lower implied totals, but the guys who are maybe on better offenses that stand out would be Clyde, Cedric Wilson, which that's a tough matchup for Wilson, but again, that might keep the ownership down, so I don't mind that. And then yeah, those are probably the two names that really stick out as guys who are on good offenses with with potentially good spots or good projections here as value options. But yeah, the rest are on some uglier teams, that's for sure.
I mean, if you don't play some of the more expensive chalk teams, I mean, you could avoid playing some of like the garbage team type of value, but that typically means that you're probably playing some type of vomit stack. Like my attitude, you know me, like if I'm going to play garbage, I'm going to play them in a correlated manner, right? So if the garbage does well, all the the garbage raises all lineups. Is the tide raises all boats or whatever it is? Like if I'm going to play garbage, I'm going to play it all together. And then the rest of my lineup is going to be pristine, top level, high projected plays. But we take a look at San Francisco, Washington, which I think is like the premier game on the slate. And we really, for 13 games, what are they doing with the schedule here that we have 10 at 1 o'clock and only 3 late games? Because I would think, San Francisco, Washington, that's a late game. Nope, that's a 1 p.m. game. Christian McCaffrey has a projection. It may be one of his highest projections of the entire season that we have his mean at almost 28. And looking around the industry, some people even have him higher than that. He's 9,600. 2 questions for you here, Kyle. 1, if you had an option on this slate to play Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill, which one would you favor? And number 2, how do you play this 49ers game? I mean, also here's a third question. I was going to say, how do you play this 49ers game that in a way that people aren't going to play it? And then the third question is, how do you build a lineup? I know it's a 13-game slate. San Francisco has a 31 implied team total against one of the worst defenses in football. Just to be clear, they're 13 and a half. They're 12 and a half point favorites on the road. How do you play a lineup at all without at least one 49er in it? Like, if you're not going to play McCaffrey, well, Debo's getting there, or Ayuk's getting there, or Kittle's getting someone's getting there, probably on the 49ers. So what is your assessment on the 49ers, this game, and in general, how the context of this for the entire slate?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think last time I was on the show with you, it was another spot where we felt similarly about the Niners, where it sort of felt like you almost wanted one Niner on most of your teams, and that worked out. It was the Arizona week where McCaffrey had 44 points, and then I think Debo also had like 22 as well. So both of those guys obviously paid off. And yeah, I sort of feel the same way here. I'm actually very curious to see where this Brock Purdy ownership actually settles in at. Like, yeah, I mean, I know he got hurt, but he was benched ultimately last week, and I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything going forward. But I wonder what it will mean to the psyche of people rostering him, right? Where he threw 4 picks against obviously a very very good defense, and I think he'll have no trouble against this Washington team. But if people are going to have that in the back of their minds, and maybe we can get any sort of discount on the ownership here, I think this is a great spot for Purdy to bounce back. And obviously, Now you mentioned how do you get different in this game? Well, looking at Debo Samuel projecting for 5% ownership here, 7-7 is a big price tag for sure. But if you want to get different with the Niners, that's in my opinion how you do it. A Purdy and Debo stack. Also, I think Ayuk is fine. But and then to answer your other question, CMC versus Hill, I think Hill is an awesome tournament play this week. I don't think he's going to get enough ownership. With no Waddle there, I think he's going to see a ton of targets, and it's a really bad matchup. But for a guy like Tyreek Hill, I'm not overly worried about it. I just think he can beat anybody whenever he wants, and they're going to need him if they're going to have any success against Baltimore. But with that being said, it's hard to take anybody over McCaffrey. I just think he's a slam dunk play this week. With we don't really have anybody projecting behind him with Elijah Mitchell out there. So, if the game gets really out of hand late in the game, we'll see some Jordan Mason, maybe some Jeremy McNichols, depending on if they call him up from the practice squad or not. But in terms of, early on in the game, or if this game somehow does stay competitive, it's going to be all McCaffrey in terms of the backfield touches. So, yeah, you mentioned the projection being his highest of the year. It's the highest we've seen from a non-quarterback. I think it's the highest we've seen from anybody all year. So I think he's just a slam dunk play. So it's hard to go away from him, but I do really, really like Tyreek Hill. In lineups for me, I think you got to start with one of McCaffrey or Hill in tournaments just because of how awesome of a tournament play Tyreek Hill is.
Well, here's a way to get different while still playing this game. Brock Purdy 7K. Sure. I agree with you. I'm not sure. We have his ownership. I mean, the ownership is going to be updated. Some of this I don't necessarily agree with. Like, we have him as one of the higher owned quarterbacks. I'm not too sure about that. It's not going to be low owned. I'm just saying that I don't know if he's going to be the highest owned quarterback. There are two value quarterbacks on the slate that project well, right? Tyrod Taylor is one of them for the Giants at 4,600. But Jacoby Brissett's 4,900. And the Commanders, even without Howell, they still drop back 40 times. They're going to be behind like probably most of this game. Everyone's cheap, right? Curtis Samuel's 4,400, McLaurin's 5,500, right? You play Logan Thomas or something like that. Why don't if McCaffrey's going to see 4 quarters worth of action, if this game is reasonably close, why can't it be that it's not like I need 30 points from Jacoby Brissett. It's not like I need 40 points from Curtis Samuel, but why can't stacking this game, even if you want to play Brissett, Samuel, or McLaurin with Logan Tom, you could play McCaffrey, Kittle in the lineup. You could play like 5 guys from this game. And your projection stays pretty healthy. I don't know how many people are going to play Jacoby Brissett, but I mean, it sounds like vomit. But if you watch the past couple of games where Brissett has come in for Howell, seems like they've had much more success with him passing the ball than Howell.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Are you down with the Brissett vomit stack to correlate with the McCaffrey lineups? Only because there may be tons of McCaffrey lineups that are just him by himself in some other game that, hey, if this game becomes a shootout, like McCaffrey's score is going to be correlated to some of these Commanders players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, anytime I'm getting ready to come on the show, I always want to think of a vomit stack, and that was going to be the first one that I was going to have in mind. So yeah, I'm right on board with the Brissett stack. Like you mentioned, he's looked better than Howell when he's been given time. I think it was a couple weeks ago in that Rams game where he engineered a couple of drives down the field, even though there was that one drive where they had the ball at the 1 yard line with 4 minutes left, and they ended up not scoring until there was 1 minute left, which obviously not ideal for a game script, but hopefully they can be better about that stuff in the future and in this game. But 4.9 price obviously down there, and he also correlates well with a guy who is projecting as a strong value and Curtis Samuel, but he's really locked into Terry McLaurin at times as well too. So McLaurin, we have I think 15% projected ownership, pretty high number there, higher than I would have expected, which that might also come down a little bit, but also think it makes sense to pair him up with that with Terry as well. So yeah, I think that there's plenty of ways that you can use Brissett. You mentioned Logan Thomas as well. So yeah, I think it makes some sense for sure. And like you mentioned, I agree. He's looked better, and he came in late against the Jets, which that's a difficult matchup. 10 for 13 for 100 yards and a touchdown. So obviously you're not necessarily assuming that a tough matchup is going to carry over just because he's playing back-to-back tough teams. But he's done it against the Jets, so maybe he can do it against the Niners a little bit here as well. So yeah, I like the Brissett call quite a bit.
Also, just to make people aware that Brian Robinson is still questionable. Rodriguez is not on IR. So if Robinson gets ruled out, I mean, you could even play, this type of lineup with Antonio Gibson at 5,200 in your running back slot, right? He catches passes out of the backfield. So like that's fine also. But let's take a look at, as my mouse jumps all over the place, the next highest total team on the slate. I don't know how on this team is going to be. We got the Eagles at the Eagles at home against the Cardinals. Jalen Hurts has the highest projection of any quarterback, but he's 8,300. It's going to be tough to make expensive quarterback lineups with Christian McCaffrey, with some of the more expensive skill position players. And it seems like the problem in this game is like Jalen Hurts just gets there on tush pushes a lot of times, and like no one comes along with him. I mean, obviously AJ Brown is there, but he's 8,600. So for you to play an $8,300 quarterback and an $8,600 wide receiver, I mean, you're probably not playing 49ers in that lineup. You're probably gonna have to play cheap running backs in that lineup. DeAndre Swift is there at 6,500, but it always seems like he's good for 10 to 15 points, but he's not going to score any touchdowns unless he scores them past the 10-yard line because he doesn't get those opportunities really.
Yeah.
I mean, I take a look at very similar to the Eagles, just to put them in both in a bucket. The Eagles with a 20, almost a 30 implied point total. And then we also have the Bills here with a 27 implied team total. And it's a very similar setup where Josh Allen's 8,200 and Stephon Diggs is $8,200 also. The benefit of this stack is that you get the kind of the Ezekiel Elliott to Mario Douglas kind of like cheap value pieces in. So like my attitude would be like, if I'm going to play Patriots value, I might as well play it in a lineup with Bills. But I also feel like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts will, and as well as Diggs and AJ Brown, will be nowhere near as owned as maybe they should be on a 13-game slate, because just the salary distribution makes it that like you're not playing Tyreek, you're not playing Christian McCaffrey, you're not playing some of the like the really well projected guys in those price range. You're not getting Kyron Williams in, right? You're stuck in like this mid range where your lineups are projected, but I'm just, from an ownership perspective, I take a look at ceiling, Kyle, of like, how often does Stephon Diggs outperform like Christian McCaffrey or someone like that, or AJ Brown? Like we've seen AJ Brown 40 games. Diggs, maybe not as much, but both these quarterbacks should also put up 40 points. What is your interest in these two games? And if you do have interest, do you have more interest in pairing the expensive players together or finding a way to like find the cheapies that the quarterback that Hurts gets there, but cheap guy gets there also with it? You play Hurts with Goddard, and the same thing with Josh Allen, where maybe you play Khalil Shakir in the lineup or something like that. But these team totals are way too high for me to just like ignore and say, nope, just play the 49ers and don't worry about it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, when you talk about comparing, the upside of Diggs to McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill right now, it's hard because Diggs hasn't really been that good lately. But I mean, Diggs does have that ability in him. Like we've seen it at times, not necessarily this year. I mean, I think in week 4 he had the big game there against Miami where he scored 3 times. But outside of that, he's been pretty average this year. But last year he was really good. So like, I still would like to think that even though they've kind of been running the ball a little bit more with James Cook at times, I still think he has the upside in him. In terms of stacking Josh Allen with someone that's a little bit cheaper, I think Shakir could be okay. I think Gabe Davis is interesting. 5.5. I don't necessarily know if that's cheap enough to sort of value that above making everything else work for the dig stack. But Gabe Davis, we've seen him either not show up to games and he's just running routes for no reason, or he's had big games, right? And in the last 7 weeks where he's actually caught a pass, 4 of those games he's played 7 games, 4 of them he's caught a pass, 3 of them he's had 24 DK points or more. So it's like he's either gonna be out there just running routes, not really getting targeted, or he's gonna have upside, right? So I think Davis is an interesting option. Maybe even as a one-off where you want to maybe stack up another side and then just play Gabe Davis as a one-off just because we know he has the upside, but obviously comes with a lot of risk. But for the Philly side, I totally agree. I think that this is a spot where you definitely don't want to avoid here. Um, they do look pretty good from a projection standpoint. When you talk about obviously playing this stack here with Hurts and AJ Brown, sort of similar to Diggs, right? Where we haven't really seen a ton of huge games from AJ Brown lately, and I think a lot of that is because of Jalen Hurts hasn't really been playing all that well. Like his fantasy production looks fine because, like you mentioned, they get down to the 1 or 2 yard line and they just push their way in. But a lot of the passing production that he had last year hasn't necessarily been there as frequently this year. He threw for 300 yards last week, and AJ Brown didn't really reap the benefits that he had 6 grabs for 80 yards, didn't really score. So that's going to be a problem for AJ Brown, but such a good matchup, and I do think that this stack's going to be very low owned. So it's definitely a spot where you would argue that at least having a small portion of your builds for stacks like the Buffalo stack or like the Hurts and Brown stack, I think that makes a lot of sense. But you could also use a guy like Goddard with Hurts. And I do like Swift on his own as well. I know it is kind of a bummer when they get down to the 1 yard line. Like last week he could have scored 3 times. He did score once. He had another play where he was down by an inch where his knee scraped the ground, but he ended up scoring, but obviously got called back. Ended up being a 2 yard loss, but that could have been another touchdown. And then he had another one where he got tackled at the half yard line and he just needed to turn his body and he would have scored. And then obviously that gets, given over to Jalen Hurts. But, it's a great matchup for DeAndre Swift as well. So I like Swift a lot here. And I don't think he'll be all that owned either. I just think that if people aren't getting to Hurts and AJ Brown, it makes sense to go to Swift, but doesn't look like that is going to be the case here. So I like Swift quite a bit this week. I think he's a really strong play, and then you can even argue that James Cook on the other side for Buffalo is a strong play as well. So I know that second tier guys like Kyron at the running back position we're probably not going to be able to get to a whole lot of, but I think guys like Swift and James Cook make sense as like that RB2 option.
Just looking back a little bit when we talk about ownership, it is a 13-game slate.
Yeah.
And I don't think ownership outside of maybe 2 people, and then maybe you could add more if you think so. Like, I don't think anyone's ownership gets out of control outside of CH and Christian McCaffrey. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if both of them are 30+% owned, but then no one, it's quite possible they're 30% owned, and then the next highest owned player is like 17% owned. Like, it does, like, and then you see a ton of people in like the 10 to 17, like it's just all kind of spread out there. A whole bunch of people in the 6 to 10 range. But like, I don't see this as a slate where you're like, well, I can't play this guy because he's 12% owned and he probably should only be 10% owned. It's like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the key facets of your lineup are you playing Christian McCaffrey? Are you playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire? And if you're playing neither of them, like, now play wherever don't worry about ownership, right? If you're playing both of them, now it's like, okay, now worry a little bit about ownership. And if you're playing one of them, it's kind of like in the middle, kind of ambivalent. Yeah. Like, so like when we talk about, that this low owned, high owned, I don't get the sense that this, like, there's some obvious spots, but there's enough of them. Like, I take a look at here, Kansas City, Cincinnati. Patrick Mahomes, 7,500. Rashee Rice projects well. You could play him with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. What's wrong about playing this? I mean, you could even plug in Travis Kelce in your tight end spot. I mean, you're not playing McCaffrey. You have to find some value. But they have a healthy implied team total. Is this a way to play CEH with, and correlating him in an extent? Or do you believe that CH is better played on his own because I don't know what the Chiefs are going to do because like CEH can catch passes out of the like we could see 8 catches from CEH, or you could see him not even go and run like routes at all, right? And maybe he doesn't even play some snaps because of pass protection or something. So like I go back and forth of like, is CEH the guy that you play as a one-off that kills off the Rashee Rice lineups? Or is he the guy that you want to have with Rashee Rice and Patrick Mahomes? And when the Chiefs put up 4 or 5 touchdowns, I mean, we've seen them in comparison to earlier this year. Earlier this year, I hated playing the Chiefs, Kyle.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, Kelsey's there, and then they have 17 wide receivers, and they can't make up their minds who they're playing and who they're throwing the ball to. Much more condensed now. I think, Rashee Rice has come out as pretty much the alpha wide receiver. And obviously, you have Travis Kelce there, and really don't have to worry about anyone else on the Chiefs anymore. So, with them being a lot more condensed and this high of a team total, I don't know. I mean, because Patrick Mahomes, this kind of stack, I know it's a little bit cheaper, but it's still for it goes in the same zone as like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. Like Brock Purdy's there at 7K. Are you into the Chiefs? And even if you play the Chiefs, do you play a run back on the bench? Do you even need a Bengal in this lineup?
I don't think you necessarily need a Bengal. I think T. Higgins is fine as a tournament option. He's going to be pretty low owned, and we saw the upside that he had last week, even with Browning in there, even against a tough defense there with Pittsburgh. So 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, so he looks pretty solid. I listened to I heard his name a couple times in the broadcast, but I still don't know how to pronounce it. Jovicius, I think it is. Yoshibas, Yoshibas, I think. Yeah, he's pretty interesting to me. I think that he's a value option that might be a name that doesn't necessarily project all that great, but I do think that he's a guy that we don't have any data on, right? So like that's a big reason why he doesn't project all that well. But he's been a guy at times who they've looked for in the red zone. You have to go back to October. I think it was like week 5 or 6, but he scored back-to-back touchdowns, and those were designed red zone targets for him back then. T. Higgins might have been out for that game, but for those games. But regardless, like it's at least good to know that they have confidence using him that way. He's 3-2. He's maybe one of the value guys that I could see potentially using, opening up some things. Same thing goes for Justin Watson, who scored last week. He had 6 targets. I do agree with you that for the most part, it looks like it's just the Rice and Kelce show from a passing perspective. But if there is someone that's kind of a cheap, next level sort of guy, it's Watson for me there. We've seen him be the deep ball guy. So Watson and Yosivas are the 2 guys that I think are the cheapies in this game that are pretty interesting. Yosivas will probably have a good amount more than the field because even though he's not projecting all that great, I still think that he's going to be the number 2 in the offense now. We saw him playing over Irwin pretty frequently last week. And I know Tyler Boyd's still around, but in terms of 2 wide receiver sets, I do think Yosivas could be the guy out there. In terms of targets and routes run last week, Yosivas was right up there. So it seems like he's just stepping into not necessarily the Jamar Chase role, but he's taking those snaps. And obviously they're not moving him around the field as much and utilizing him as much because he's not Jamar Chase. But the role was pretty promising last week. So I like him quite a bit. And then in terms of the Clyde and Rashee Rice discussion, I don't think you necessarily need to play these guys together or need to avoid it. I think that it's fine either way. I do think I prefer Clyde on his own more, but I don't necessarily feel like I have a great like it could easily be a spot where Clyde only gets there because of his pass game work, which that's pretty much been why he's gotten there in the past, right? In that game against the Patriots when he filled in for Pacheco, he only had 37 rushing yards. He had 13 carries, 37 rushing yards, only got there because of his receiving work. 4 catches, 64 yards, and a receiving touchdown. So you can easily make the case that Clyde's value comes with, his pass catching, but, they are touchdown favorites here at home. Maybe they're able to run the ball a little bit more. Mahomes hasn't been as, Mahomesy the past couple of weeks. Like he's struggled, right? He looked bad last week against the Raiders. Maybe they want to run the ball a little bit more. I don't think that's something I'm overly concerned with, but maybe it's just sort of another path to more touches for Clyde there. So I do prefer Clyde separate from Rashee Rice, but you can definitely play them together. And Rashee Rice, I think, a spectacular play. I think at this point, he's better than Kelsey for me in terms of a play because I know Kelsey, you kind of get a unique sort of upside there at the tight end position, but Rashee Rice is just so valuable in this offense right now. 9+ targets in 5 straight games. He had 12 targets last week. So yeah, I think Rice is in a really good spot here.
My favorite game on the slate. I ran a bunch of lineups earlier, compared projection versus ownership. Obviously, numbers are going to change between now and Sunday. Once you add correlation to this, I think it's a slam dunk. It's not like you figure 13 games. I'd be the vomit master on the slate, right? But it's like Brissett is there. Yeah, sure. Okay. And with the chalkier game, I could play that. But when you mentioned before, Tyreek Hill, right, is going to be, I think it's going to be much lower owned than Christian McCaffrey on this slate. And it's going to be pretty hard to play both of them in a lineup that you'd actually like to play. Why not play Tyreek Hill in a correlated way? And I'm not talking about Tua. I think my eyes are on Lamar Jackson plus Zay Flowers plus Isaiah Likely with Tyreek Hill as the run back. I don't even mind playing Cedric Wilson in that lineup also. I don't mind playing a whole bunch of this game because the way the Dolphins play with big plays. Yes, the Ravens defense is good. But if you're going to play Tyreek Hill, you're playing for the fact that the Dolphins are actually going to score points. The Ravens have actually been throwing the ball way more than they've been running the ball from the beginning this year. From a price perspective, Zay Flowers is $5,600 and Isaiah Likely is $4,600. You get kind of a salary savings where you could still play a Rashee Rice one-off or an Olave one-off. You could still play. You can't get up to McCaffrey. You probably can't get up to Kyron Williams or anything at your running backs at a second running back spot. But you're able to do a lot. And listen to the people that are in my lineup. Lamar Jackson, he is a ceiling. Zay Flowers has a ceiling. Isaiah Likely has a ceiling. And Tyreek Hill has a super ceiling. The total in this game is 46.5. It's not like this is not a low total game. I don't know how I look at this ownership here and I go, how could Lamar Jackson be all that owned when some people will play Hurts, some people will play Josh Allen, some will play Mahomes. You'll have the Purdy people, right, in this price range. And then you take a look at 4,600 tight end. People typically play down. They'll pay up for McBride. They'll be in the zone. And then you also have just the dynamic that way more people are playing McCaffrey than Tyreek Hill. That why don't I get an even bigger edge up on the Tyreek Hill lineups than just playing them with Ravens and Lamar Jackson? I mean, are you ever shocked if he put up 80 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, and 3 passing touchdowns and 260 yards? I mean, he is obviously has a ceiling. It's going to be scary because when you play this stack, you're pretty much not playing any 49ers. But it's a 13-game slate. This is the fade. If I'm going to fade the 49ers, why wouldn't I be fading it with these types of guys?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you make a great case. I think it's a really, really good spot in terms of having all these guys with these nice ceilings who are going overlooked, and even the game sales are pretty high total. And then we saw Tyreek Hill right last week. He had 9 catches for 99 yards, and that's a disappointing game for Tyreek Hill. But that's a tough matchup against Dallas as well. So to your point, even though it is a tough matchup against Baltimore, you're playing Tyreek Hill for the big plays. So if you don't get those, you're probably going to be disappointed by the outcome anyway, just because he's so expensive and it's going to be difficult for him to sort of compete with McCaffrey. But if he breaks the big plays, if he has 2 long touchdowns, which he could easily have, which I want to say it was last year, week 2 or something, where Miami and Baltimore combined for 90 points or something like that. Because I recall Waddle and Hill also had big games with Mark Andrews having a big game. So it could easily turn into that once again here, which that would be a great spot. Obviously, Baltimore's defense is much better this year than they were last year because I think they're probably top 2 or top 3 defense in the NFL, arguably number 1. So, but it's still Tyreek Hill. He can beat anybody. I love Zay Flowers this week. I think he is in a fantastic spot, and his usage has been really strong. And then Lamar as well. I mean, Lamar could essentially win the MVP award this week. So he could lock it down. And I know, it's a narrative, but something that he's talked about. So if he has a good game, you're not giving the MVP award to anybody else here if he has a good game and they win. So that could be, added incentive for them to maybe pad the stats a little bit with him. So Lamar and Zay Flowers stacking, yeah, if you want to add Likely, I don't mind Likely either. He kind of, I was a little bit disappointed in his usage last week, but he had a couple of long receptions there that sort of salvaged his day. And then, I think it makes sense to even throw Cedric Wilson in there if you want to add some value. But for the most part, yeah, I love that stack.
Okay. Any other games that you're looking at?
Obviously you mentioned the news is going to really impact some things. I think if we see Josh Jacobs out, and then obviously even Pittman out, you're going to have some value open up in this Las Vegas Indy game here. I mean, Zamir White looked great last week against the Chiefs, and the Colts defense is not as good as the Chiefs there. So Zamir White, I think, would be a pretty slam dunk play there at 5-1 if Jacobs is out again. The Tennessee Houston game is one that I'm sort of interested in. CJ Stroud coming back seems like people. I mean, back before we got the concussion, everyone was trying to roster CJ Stroud, right? And it was the hottest thing on the market in a couple of those games, right? And he's coming back now and getting 5% projected ownership. I know the receiving crew isn't as good there with no Tank Dell, but Nico Collins is still around. He's pretty expensive at 7.2, but he still is going to be a guy who projects for a healthy amount of targets there. You have Noah Brown, who's had some big games. So I think this Houston stat could be one that's pretty interesting. And then you have a couple of guys on the other side, DeAndre Hopkins. He could make some sense. Would prefer Levis to be back for these guys just because it seems like their offense is a little bit more pop with Levis there. And I was surprised. It looked like he almost had a chance to play last week. That was pretty surprising. But so if he's back this week, I think Hopkins is fine. Okonkwo as a value option. Schultz at 4.3 as a tight end option. So I think that this game could be one that is somewhat interesting there. The total is also, I think, 44.5 or 45. So not a bad total there either. So I would say that game sort of stands out for me.
Right. I don't mind playing. I actually prefer to play this from the Singletary side. You do Levis, Hopkins on Okonkwo with Singletary like that. Obviously, Stroud obviously has a ceiling, and just from a price perspective, it's like once you pair Stroud at 7,100 with Nico Collins at 7,200, it just feels like, why aren't I just playing Mahomes and Rashee Rice? Why aren't I just playing Lamar with Zay Flowers? Why, like, it just, I don't know. I think Singletary, I think if it wasn't for the fact that CEH is a value and McCaffrey is in an absurdly projected spot, like, Houston has a 24 implied team total at home, and Singletary is clearly the lead back, and they have no problem giving him as many touches as he wants. At 5,600, it's hard for me to not use him as value in my, Miami, Baltimore. Like, if I can't play McCaffrey, but I can play CEH and Singletary in that lineup and still kind of like my lineup and still. So, I mean, it's not like Singletary is going to be low owned. But he probably, truthfully, he may from a sim. If we go to Sim Labs, which you could get if you're a premium member here at RotoGrinders, click on the link in the description, get $10 off your first month. Stuff for Sim Labs won't come out until later today, but I guarantee you that if the ownership stays the way that I think it's going to be, where CH is twice as owned as Singletary, their range of outcomes aren't wide enough to justify that ownership difference. And people look at the Texans and go, "Oh, the Texans are in the Chiefs." Like, dude, it's a 1 point implied point difference. That's it, right? The Titans defense is, I mean, dude, they're playing guys off the street now, right? I think the Titans are. I mean, I have no problem with Devin Singletary and over CEH just for the ownership. So I'm looking at that. But are you looking at any? I mean, people coming here expecting the vomit stacks. Do you have any interest in Justin Fields against Atlanta? Like it's a 37.5 team implied, game total. But doesn't Justin Fields and DJ Moore fit the bill of if they show up, no matter what the team total or game total or anything is, if Fields has 100 yards rushing and DJ Moore has 100 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, you're not shocked, right? Just that I'm never thrilled playing the Bears at home. It's cold, windy, and they're not good. I mean, they're not good.
Yeah, they aren't good, and Atlanta is just the worst thing ever for fantasy. I mean, their whole goal is just to end the game as fast as possible. And it really is something to see. So this game could get really ugly. I will say though, if Cole Kmet's out, you already have Darnell Mooney. We haven't projected out right now, so you have 2 of the top 3 pass catching options there. So maybe it's a spot where we see just 40% of the targets just funnel to DJ Moore. And that would be fine. But I will say, for me, it is very difficult to really enjoy this stack just because of it being in Chicago. Chicago kind of sucks. Even though we've seen Justin Fields have some good games recently, and I still like Fields as a fantasy quarterback. But man, it's just Atlanta. They actually just ruin so many things from a fantasy perspective, not only on their own team but for their opponents as well, just because of the way that they sort of try to just take the air out of the ball, run the clock out. And I mean, from quarter 1, they're just trying to run the clock. And so it's pretty brutal. And I assume they'll only continue to do that more in Chicago in the cold weather there. I think, if I was looking for an ugly vomit stack, I think, the Giants is one that I think might actually be, I don't want to say popular because I don't think people are going to go crazy playing Tyrod Taylor, but I do think he'll have some ownership. And I actually think, when we look at some cash lineups, if we're like reviewing cash lineups on Monday, I think Tyrod Taylor might be the cash game quarterback, just to be able to fit some of these expensive guys. So for a guy who might be used in cash, but probably not going to get a ton of ownership in tournaments, I think that makes some sense. We saw Darius Slayton have the 70-yard touchdown last week. He makes sense to pair him up with. Wanda Robinson, 4K. He had 7 targets last week. He now has 7 targets in 2 of his last 3 games. He's not really a high upside guy for Wandale. Like, you kind of are hoping for like 8 catches and 60 yards, and maybe he falls in the end zone. But you can also pair Tyrod up with Saquon, who's been involved in the passing game a lot. And then Darren Waller, it takes a lot to get behind it because he did have 5 targets last week, but he didn't really play a lot. Like he sort of came in late in the game. I think he had like 3 targets in the last drive. One of them was I think just kind of throwing the ball down the field, see how far they can get, and I think it might have even been a throwaway. But Darren Waller, if he's going to be healthier come this week, maybe they use him a little bit more. He does have 5 targets in back-to-back weeks since returning from the injury, so there are some ugly ways to sort of stack up Tyrod Taylor. And if you pair Tyrod with any of those 3 cheap pass catchers, Robinson, Slayton, or Waller, after that, you pretty much don't have to worry a ton about salary. So the Giants might be a spot to consider.
Right, and you could play Kyron Williams in this lineup as the run back, and you could still play Christian McCaffrey in another running back slot. I already looked at this, right? Because that's why I'm like, people are going to play Brissett vomit, or are they going to play Tyrod vomit? If you had a choice, even in cash games, so you're not worried necessarily about ceiling, are you more comfortable playing Tyrod Taylor or Jacoby Brissett? Assuming, I mean, they're close to the same price, so let's not worry about the $300 because they project very close to one another. I think Brissett has more upside, but it's quite possible that the second half Sam Howell come. Just they put Sam Howell in or something, but I don't think they put Tommy DeVito in. I think Cutlets is done. I think and also Tyrod Taylor may have maybe a little bit more rushing upside. The Rams defense is maybe not as, I don't know. I mean, they both the Giants and the Commanders are awful. So it's hard for me to say like who would you rather have, but I'm guessing you would say Tyrod, or is it closer than is it so close that you might as well flip a coin?
Yeah, I think the tiebreaker there is I do think that Brissett has a higher ceiling. Like, if they are able to move the ball, obviously it's a tough matchup, and I really wouldn't be surprised if Washington just bricks and they get shut out by the 49ers, because the 49ers have a really good defense. But in terms of that could also happen for the Giants because of just how bad they are. But in terms of who I think has the better game, if both offenses are clicking, I do think it is Washington. So I think I would give the slight edge to Brissett. But I do think that Tyrod's a little bit safer, if that makes sense. I think he probably drops a dud less than Brissett does. So maybe he's the safer option for cash, and Brissett's the better option for tournaments. But yeah, either way, there's obviously a lot of risk with both of these guys because they could both get benched again. I would be pretty surprised if they go back to DeVito after, especially like some of the things that DeVito said, where he didn't seem too pleased with it. Which it just seems like it would be in weird. It would be weird timing. It's sort of in poor taste if they just go right back to DeVito like in the middle of this game here. But the Howell thing, that could easily happen. At one point, that Howell was their franchise quarterback, and now it sucked a few games, and now they've come and bring Brissett in, so that could happen. But definitely a lot of risk with both of these guys for sure. But I think Tyrod may be a little bit safer, Brissett a little bit more upside. I will say though, Brissett, he's one of the most successful quarterbacks in NFL history in terms of those 1 yard runs. So obviously slightly behind Jalen Hurts, but if he gets down to the 1 yard line, people playing Antonio Gibson might be displeased there with maybe a tush push-esque play for Brissett. I wouldn't be surprised if Brissett gets a rushing touchdown.
Is that one of your props today? Anytime touchdown, right? Because we have the props and pick 'em package here at RotoGrinders. Even if you're not playing DFS, right? If you just want to do props and pick them, underdog, prize picks, all the sports books, everything like that, you could use our statistical projections in order to bet on those, in order to make your picks. That's what I do, right? And I'm selling this to you, and I'm telling you, the first, we're running a sale. It's half off till January 1st. And I'm telling you, do not do it. Do not do it. Because the more people, Kyle, the more people that use our projections, right? They use, to be honest, like, feel free to use the picks, right? If a Beer Makers fan, Britt has a pick, Grant has a pick, Kyle, you put up picks there. I don't know. I'm more of a computer person. I'm not a people. Can you tell? I'm not a people person. I see someone's face here. I don't trust that. Kevin Taylor, who's this guy? I don't trust that guy. Right? Look at the Beer Makers fan is too tall to give out picks. So no, I'm not. I don't. Britt, have you ever talked to Britt? No. Okay, I don't care about Britt. I care about what our projections say. We have these tools that show the prop model, right, and all where all the edges lie in all the books. Right? You could get this on its own. This is part of RotoGrinders Combo Premium. So if you want to get everything for DFS, you get this also. But I don't want you to, because this is what I use. Okay? This is what I use to make money in sports betting. So the more people, Kyle, that use this, the quicker the lines are going to move. The edges are going to go away, right? I don't want to give out the edges. I don't want to. But since I'm on the RotoGrinders YouTube channel, I have to tell you about this. I'm fiduciarily responsible. In order to the marketing department, the corporate overlords are forcing me to tell you that I use our RotoGrinders statistical projections I use it in college football, Kyle. I'm going to look at my picket for player props in college football. And remember, I'm just I literally download our statistical projections, or you could look at the top 20. We have this little top 20 list. So if you're only going to bet on a couple of things, you just, why even download it? Just look and see what's available. Obviously, check the timestamp to make sure it's updated. But I'm going to go to my picket for college football. And Kyle, you know how much I know about college football, right?
Not much.
Not much at all. Not much at all. Right? So I go, okay, what was all time? Where's my college football? So remember, this is 10 weeks worth of props, right? College football. I have to sort it out by props. It doesn't because probably around $9,000 or so. Doing all remember, I do $30-$40 bets, right? So this is not $2,000. No, I bet on 100, 150. Dude, if there's an edge, I go on the prop screen. I go, is there an edge here? Give it to me. Give it to me. And I'll just bang them out on typically Thursday for college football. Just bang them out. Bang them out. Bang them. Go to DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, whatever. Bang, 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 bang. And then when Saturday comes, Kyle, I don't even know what I'm rooting for. I'm not watching the games. I have no clue. All I know is that I wake up Sunday morning for NFL and I reload my picket, and it's like, oh, I made $760 yesterday on college football props. You know how I did that? I just used the statistical projections that we have here. NHL, I do the same thing. How much do I know about NHL? It's a whole bunch of, people with the K's in their name and Z's in their name. I have to get the spellings right, everything like that. No, I go to our prop model. Right. We could go right here. NHL prop model. Right. Just right here. The projection should be updated, right? It's 11:50, right? 2 hours ago. Here, Ovechkin under half of an assist, 9% edge on DraftKings. Go get it. Go get it. Right? And then I will do this after the show, literally, Kyle. All this hockey stuff right here, all these assists and points and whatever. I'll just go and I'll put $30 on like all of them. Right? Just the top 20. And then I'll wait till later. I'll download the rest later. And I'll do because the block shots props come out and everything like that.
Yeah.
That's like $600. These edges are like 5 to 10% edges. So you know how long it takes me to bang out the top 20 in hockey? 4 minutes, maybe. 3 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Search and replace. I got to do some searches. I got 3 minutes. Let's call it 3 minutes, Kyle. Okay, do the math for me. Okay. So I do all my NHL. Do the top. You could do the top 20 in the prop model in 3 minutes. Okay, because most of it is on DraftKings. Most of the best numbers are on DraftKings anyway. It makes it easier. Okay, 3 minutes. The average edge of most of these props, let's just say, is 5%. Okay. I put $30 down on each of them, right? So 30 times 20 is what?
30 times 20? 600?
Yes. 600. Okay. $600 with an expectation of 5%. So what's the expectation on for $600? 5%.
That would be what? 30?
$30.
Yeah.
So that's the expectation of my time, $30. But it only took me 3 minutes. Right? So what is my hourly rate doing NHL betting? If I can make $30 in expectation in 3 minutes.
Yeah, not my brain's hurting. It's too early for that much math.
$600 an hour, Kyle. I'm making $600 an hour. Imagine not paying for this. It's like what? It's like $20 a month. $20 a month to make $600 an hour. Obviously, I'm kind of like exaggerating how you would do, because you wouldn't obviously be doing this for the entire day. It's like you get paid for that much for 3 minutes, but whatever. It sounds good. And the whole thing about sports betting marketing is that it just has to sound good and people will buy it. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So like that, but this is how I bet. I use our projections, and Kyle, you do plenty of our projections also. So whatever you do in the numbers, I'm out there and give me 800 things and whatever, and just whatever has an edge, and I'm just throwing it against the wall. And when you do it that way, you don't have to think much. I'm not thinking of like, well, is this guy going to really, I don't care. No care in the world. Is it on the sheet? Good. Give it to me. Right. Give it to me. Give it all to me. And I'm typically done in like an hour, typically less than an hour a day. NBA depends on if I choose, and NBA could take a lot more time because 8 million things happen. But imagine spending less than an hour a day to get, on average, a 5 to 10% expectation on a large portfolio of bets. Like that's what this is. So that's what I do.
Yeah. I mean, when you put it in terms of $600 an hour, it's hard to pass that up,
Right. We're giving it's like, here's the tools to make $600 an hour. And you don't have to stuff envelopes or anything or whatever. You don't have to do telemarketing calls and sell things on the phone or whatever the scam things that, I was always stuffing envelopes. I remember when I was younger, like ads in the newspaper or something that would say, you want to make $38 an hour stuffing envelopes? Like that sounds a little too good to be true. What are they stuffed with? So there's my sales pitch. And I always make this props and pick 'em sales pitch as this is what I use. And the more people that use it, the less, like, I don't want people to use this. It's shocking that so few people do actually use this. So
is this
click
like
on the link in the description if you want to use it like I do. But truthfully, if I had to tell you, I don't want you to. I would rather they block this out. I'd rather they wouldn't even offer this, and only my account, literally only my account, my BlenderHD account on RotoGrinders.com was the only one that could access this page. Right? If I was the only one to access this page, I probably wouldn't even be on the show anymore because I'd be making so much money. Right? I just quit. Right? I tell Devin right now, I'm done. 2023, I'm done. Right? But no, I happen to enjoy doing this on a regular basis. So there. Let Dean try to pitch this props and pick and package the way that I do. No chance. Best salesman in the business. Anything that you're trying to sell, Kyle? Any content coming out this week that you're putting out?
Yeah, I'll have the Sunday best article that'll come out later tonight. We'll have the prop model video, the short that'll come out later today, and then all of the tags and stuff for the main slate for NFL. So yeah, stay tuned for all that, and then any sort of props that I'll have for NBA and NFL throughout the next couple of days. So yeah, check those out.
And I'm going to be able to predict what you're going to have in your prop model video.
Probably by going to the screen that you're just
at.
at.
Model before you make the video, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I even get a head start on you on the right when people are like, "Oh, I'm going to wait for Kyle's video." It's like, I already got those numbers, right? Then you watch the video, it's like, the numbers may be gone, right? Same for the Blitz, right? If you subscribe to the Blitz, Cardi does all these Blitz shows. It's like, do people not realize that the Blitz is updated Wednesday afternoon? And he does like a show Thursday morning, and then like on Thursday morning, he does a show, and then all the numbers move. Like if you're on Prize Picks, like basically a half an hour after Cardi does his Blitz prop show, like those numbers just move. They just like automatically move. And I'm just sitting, people are complaining, I wasn't able to get it. It's like, dude, I got all of this like last night. Like, well, how did you get it because I looked at the Blitz last night. I didn't wait for Derek's hair to come on screen and tell me about it. Like I can look at this stuff. It's available to you. Don't even wait for the video. Right?
The hair's a good selling point, though.
Right, but that's the selling point. I'm kind of saying that you shouldn't wait for Kyle's video, but I'm just letting you know that it's not like it's Kyle. It's not like it's magic. You're doing a prop model video. You're just going to look at the prop model and go, "This is what the prop model says," and just make it into a video.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Hey, see, this is we show you how the sausage is made behind the scenes at RotoGrinders, right?
Yep.
Same thing for Sim Labs, right? When I say, this thing is overowned, and I'm like, all I'm doing is running stuff through Lineup HQ and Sim Labs and saying, Lamar Jackson looks pretty good. It's like, it's not because I know him personally and I know he's going to have a good interest. I just use the numbers that we have here. So use our numbers. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month, and I'll see you back on Monday, right? In the new year. I'll see you back in the new. It's going to be a whole year a whole year closer to death. Right. I'm going to end on
that's a great way to put it.
Way. That's why you got to make your $600 an hour in props as quickly as possible before you die. Right. Because you're 1 year closer to death. Hit that like button. Maybe the last thing you do when you're alive. If that's the last thing you do, that I would love it. Hit that thumb button. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. We got Grinders live. We got Crunch Time later today. We got NHL. We got tons of stuff. Go check it out. And I'll see you back on Monday, as I am always here, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, talking about all things you're thinking about. Daily fantasy, pick 'em, and props on RotoGrinders Today.